Live. Okay. Gonna see a bump in my shirt. Okay, so let's see. We're gonna wait for some comments to let us know that we have indeed gone live on the interwebs. And then I'm probably gonna read the comments much less during this live stream on an interruptive basis. We'll get to the questions at the end to the extent that people have them. So if we're live, which we should be, let's see some comments like a Y to indicate that everyone is now seeing Viva Frei and the Walrus Whisperer live on the YouTube. Oh, you know what? They tend to run an ad right at the beginning of the live stream. So we'll see if this takes a couple of minutes for people to start pouring in.
Am I able to chat as well, or is that something that only you're able to see?
Can you see chat on your end?
Well, I see that it says chat.
There we go. You see, now do you see Kira James, School, Monkey, Hope, Marion, everybody saying yay? Do you see any of these comments on the right-hand side of your screen?
No.
What you could do if you want to get distracted is bring it up on YouTube, and then you could see some of the chat. But
I have enough distractions.
Okay.
I'll let you take care of that.
Oh, geez, I'm going to try to. I'm not going to try to ignore them. I'm just going to try to not look at them while we get into the substance of this. This is phenomenal. Okay, so first of all, Phil, while everyone starts coming in, because people are going to get the notifications, thank you infinitely for doing this. This is amazing.
It's my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk. For people who know me, I have a. It's no bother for me to talk. So let's do it.
Okay, and like I said, we've been in touch before this live stream. So full disclosure. Incidentally, two full disclosures. This is being documented on like a sort of meta documentary basis. So there's a mic for a third party who's doing a documentary and wanted to maybe have some of the back scenes to the live stream. So if anybody notices a little mic here, that's what that is. And the other full disclosure is that I've been in touch with Phil, on a private basis for a little while to set this up and to have some discussions. And I told Phil what I said I'm going to tell everybody before we get started. This is going to be an awesome live stream. It's going to be the way I do it normally during these interview processes. The nuance is that there is active litigation going on. And I take for granted, and I told Phil, take for granted that the lawyer and the party that is suing you is going to watch this, is going to look for things to use against you. I'm not here to help or protect. I just want to ask my own questions and bear that in mind. So,
well, it'd be a little helpful if you protected me a little bit. But.
Well, I just want to interview and like get the actual story behind the proceedings. I've done 2 videos breaking down Marineland's lawsuit and your defense, but just know, lawyers are waiting to pounce on things. So I don't want to. I'm not trying to ask for confidential information. I don't want it. And I'm not here to get you into trouble. Just know that everything you can and say will and may be used against you in the court of law, type thing when you're involved in litigation.
It's not exactly my first rodeo, but okay.
Okay, and so with that said, I guess we can get into this. People have been asking for this since my first breakdown of law proceedings when I started focusing on vlogs, and they said, you do a lot of American content and American lawsuits. Have you heard of Phil Demers? Look into it and do something. And I spent a few months getting familiar with it, and here we are. So we're going to start from the very, very beginning, Phil. Where are you from? Family situation, siblings? Tell me about it.
I'm from a family of 5. I'm a middle child from a small place called Welland, Ontario, which is essentially a stone's throw from Niagara Falls, which most people are familiar with, the famous Niagara Falls. Okay, what else do you want to know? I mean, how far do you want to
5 kids. What are your parents like? What do they do for a living growing up?
My dad worked in the steel factory. He bounced around from job. Actually started his own business, and my mom's had jobs here and there as well. Blue collar, gritty.
Okay, very nice. And let's see. I mean, I've read the proceedings, so I sort of know some of these questions already. High school education, university degree?
Yeah. No, the extent of my post-secondary education endeavors sort of ended after one of those, those 6-month Trebas Institute courses where you can go learn to do nifty things in studios. Mine wasn't exactly that, but it was similar. So it was, it was an expensive, intensive 6-month program that ultimately made someone rich, but it wasn't me.
And so after that, well, let's say, I guess after high school, before going to work for Marineland, what did you do?
I did a little bit of traveling. I worked actually for my dad for a while. Because I didn't really have a lot of focus, he sort of liked to make sure I was working. So he made me go work for him. And that was really quite grueling. It's one of those lessons you learn in life. Maybe it was good for me to necessarily learn it early. I knew that being on a production line was not going to work for me. And so it was through sort of that arduous soul searching that I decided that maybe I'd be better suited to work at a place like Marineland where there's animals and whatnot, So like when the opportunity came up and it crossed my path, I thought, hey, let's do this. And I took a shot and I got the job.
And how old were you when you started working for them, and what year was that?
I was 22 and it was 2000.
And you worked for them for close to a decade?
12 years.
Over a decade.
12 years. Yes.
Okay, amazing. And when you started working there, I mean, what was Marineland like? What were you doing? What was the experience like?
It's funny because I actually have these vivid recollections of just moments, some poignant, some having no rhyme or reason why they'd be in my mind, but I can revisit them. And right now I'm on the back of a truck and there's a steel bucket with little fish in it. And there's a bunch of young, vibrant people, and we're in the back of the truck. And this is day one for me, and we're driving out to go feed whales. And one of the male trainers grabs a fish and bites the head off of it. They're dead fish, granted, and he spits it at another coworker, and he throws a fish at him. This was the type of environment that I was getting into. And then I'm also remembering, going to see backstage where these sea lions live and being like, not too impressed, and seeing some whales in indoor pools that you think, I wonder why they're there. And then ultimately finding out why, when you start the job, there's a lot of factors that weigh into anyone starting a new job. Pressure from your parents, just general pressure in life and everything else. My first day at Marineland, I would say I was on the 50-yard line. Whether or not this was something for me, it was kind of like, But as I got to know the people, and eventually the animals, you aren't exactly thrown in. I mean, yeah, sure, I was feeding whales on day one, but we weren't ultimately best friends. But it was the sort of supportive group around me that made it an environment that I wanted to work in. So you start to put blinders on. It's just how it works. To a certain capacity. Complications with me arose when, as I was there longer, and conditions and just generally, I would say just the state of the business affairs at Marineland as a whole sort of got a little bit more laxed and, I don't know, less concise, less sort of planned out, with a lack of a vision and sound leadership, things can get pretty nasty. So as things would progress for me, and as I would start to be one of the persons making the decisions on behalf of the animals, or for what I thought was in the best interest of the animals, you sort of cross paths with the best interests of management. So that transition didn't happen so smoothly for me. I took a lot of pride in being the voice for the animals. I mean, that's the role as a trainer. Your job is to interpret the animals' needs and express it, and accommodate them as best you can, and then express that to the other people that are involved in the care of animals, such as veterinarians and managers and whatnot. You sort of become a little bit more disillusioned with what becomes of some of the decisions when they're in the interest of the bottom line. It rarely bodes well for animals when money and profits are in the consideration. And for me, of course, the complications are compounded when, you start to love animals. And I did share an anomalous relationship with a walrus, which, in a lot of ways kept me at Marineland probably longer than I would have otherwise been there. Perhaps not even on my own accord. Marineland didn't love me on my way out. That's for sure. And it'd be fair to say that I didn't love them on my way out either.
But okay, and let's back up a little bit. Like you're there for 12 years. at roughly what time do things start to go south in terms of your relationship with the executives or management?
I mean, I would say that I became more vocal or unignorably vocal maybe in the last couple of years, enough so to get on the actual owner's radar. I mean, it became sort of known that I was deemed a problem employee. I wasn't the first problem employee, and you can see, history sort of dictated what became of problem employees. So it became evident that I was on his radar. But I was brass, and circumstances just happen sometimes in such a way that decisions get made for you. My way out, as much as I'd like to think was a conscious decision, it was a decision based on a lot of factors. And one of which, in fact, was because I had won that money from winning a reality TV show that I was on because of the Walrus and my relationship with the Walrus. I won like $50,000, and that to me opened the door of opportunity. That's what I saw. Whereas prior to, I might have been more stuck than even I would like to have admitted. Now suddenly there was this level of freedom and opportunity, if you will.
So, okay, and
I left.
Before we get there now, so over the 12 years, was there a change in how the animals were? Did you notice a change in how the animals were kept and the treatment of the animals, or was it basically the same from day one to the end, but you only became more sensitive to and aware of it, say later on after having worked there for a while?
That's a maybe one of the best questions I've ever actually heard. No one's ever asked me that. It's sort of that exact capacity, perfectly articulated. I would say it was both, right? You learn more as you evolve and as you're staying there and whatnot. But as far as the conditions getting worse, yeah, what happened was, I mean, the straw that broke the walrus's back, if you will, was when there was a breakdown in the water disinfection unit over my final winter there. And prior to opening for what would have been my final season, or actually would have been, I never made the season because I actually elected to quit just before the summer season opened. See, Marineland's open for only so many months out of the year, the summer. They're closed in the winter. But that was a long winter for the animals with that broken disinfection unit. And the suffering was, well, it was brutal. And that's essentially what caused me to leave. But the sort of systematic breakdown that led to that, yeah, it was evident. I mean, yeah, we were getting less and less staff and more animals. More and more animals means less and less space for other animals. Other species are now living in the same water as species as that they shouldn't, in temperature they shouldn't. Other species of animals are harming other species of animals because they're encroached in their cages. I mean, there was a lot of problems.
Okay, and you mentioned.
What is crazy?
Sorry, go ahead.
What is crazy is I actually thought when I quit, I thought, it can't actually get worse than this. And that was 7 years ago. So.
Okay, and it's something that you mentioned that I've actually never fully appreciated until this very minute, is that during the off season, the animals don't go anywhere. So during the summer they get out and they do some shows and they do tricks and they perform. But what happens exactly during the off season, if you're allowed to mention, like practically speaking, what happens?
Well, what happens is you lose a lot of your support staff. So many of the people that were there that were otherwise able to give some of their time and attention to the animals are gone. So you're running on a skeletal crew. You've got you've got a lot of animals there. I mean, current count of beluga whales alone at Marineland exceed 50. So if you're a skeleton crew and you're having to take care of arguably, in excess of 100 animals, well, you try to divide that over multiple feeds over multiple times a day. What becomes of your job is you're running around with your head cut off, trying to get the animals food and medication and as much attention as you can, while trying not to you yourself go insane. So it's the winter was it got worse and worse in the off seasons. It seemed conditions, and that's when it generally applied, was in the winter, because that's when we were skeletal crew, like just few people. And of course, as more senior people quit and leave, and that's obviously a trend just in the industry alone. I mean, who wants to be a 40-year-old doing flips off a dolphin? I mean, I didn't even know that at 34 I was an old man doing it. But that's just the way it goes. You lose senior people, you get more naive people, younger people. They get trained suddenly in a more laxed environment. At least, not to defend that we were so much better than this new generation of trainers and whatnot, but we had a rather rigorous training program to learn how to become a trainer in-house. We actually were taught. There were lessons and whatnot. All that's out the window now. A lot of things have changed. I wouldn't say that it's been for the better. I can't say that it's been for the better on any example.
Okay, and now because this is a lead into a question that which may be uncomfortable, but it's going to come out no matter what. When does the relationship, the imprinting, happen with Smooshi? Like year-wise?
Okay, so admittedly, my memory's just not great, but I'm gonna say in and around 2006, 2007, we get Smooshi from wild caught from from Russia with another walrus, and she's there for a matter of days before we actually have to draw blood from her, and that's sort of it's an intrusive process for animals that are not trained, right? So the trainers are jumping on her, we're trying to grapple her and hold the walruses down to draw blood, and this causes a panic, and it causes Smooshi to go into this sort of panic, and she's climbing the trainers and the other animals and whatnot, and that's when I just sort of, in an effort to lead her away, I put my hands in front of her, and just in that exact precise moment, whether it be a millisecond or a fraction of a second of sorts, something happened in her brain, and the circuitry rewired such that I became her mom. And so I would say that was probably 2006.
Okay, and instantly, it's again, bearing in mind a lawyer might look through this afterwards and say, you said 2006 and it was 2008, therefore you're unreliable. That's not the.
I haven't sworn on anything.
No, well, look, I mean, it's a known fact that
if he wants to do that, you know what? Listen, if he wants to do that, I invite him to. Hey, tell you what, it was 1999 when I started. I take it back. It was 1999. Sue me.
So no, that's not the purpose of the question. Is to get a concrete.
You can see how fired up I get, eh? Maybe full disclosure, if I get fired up at the mention of having my speech either impeded or always having to watch my words. It gets a little bit exhausting. I'm not blaming you. I'm just letting you know what happens is I start to get this little vein in my forehead starts to bulge there. So just letting you know that's a precursor.
No, I'm not. It's not a question of suppression of speech. It's just bear in mind your what you say publicly will be dissected, Barney. What you say will be publicly dissected. Or let me rephrase.
And I hope that it is.
My goal is not the day. It's roughly roughly halfway into your employment. It's like midway through. You have this experience with the walrus, and so there's a lot of period of time afterwards before we get to what we're going to get to in terms of the lawsuit. You said, and if you see me looking down and playing with my phone, it's not to be rude. I'm just taking notes. Wild caught. What does that mean?
It means she was a wild animal. She was not bred in a zoo. She was not born in the zoo. She had no human contact prior to being captured by humans with the intention of selling her to a place like Marineland.
And now, does it mean accidentally caught? Or I know nothing about this.
No.
So not brought up in a net by accident when they're trolling for fish. This is someone goes out to catch a walrus to sell it to captivity.
Yes, and you can imagine at that age they're only months old. So, and the walrus moms are very protective. So, you can imagine just the horror scenes that can ensue with that, and assume that the mother walrus is never on the winning end.
Okay, so I had no idea about that. I'm again ignorant and naive, and sort of take for granted that the vast majority of these animals we see in the zoos are sort of saved from accidents or rehabilitation, rehabilitated where they can't go back to nature. But this, as far as you know, the Smooshi the walrus or any of these animals, wild caught means not accidentally through other means of fishing, whatever, but actually deliberately hunted for the purposes of selling into captivity.
Absolutely, without question.
Okay, that's not well. I've been to zoos in the past and sort of always viewed it through the other spectrum.
Well, then in such a case, it should be noted that Canada's only remaining captive killer whale, Kiska, who resides at Marineland, was also wild captured. So she would have been torn away from her mother at the age of like 2 years old. And she's been living in captivity now in excess of 40. And, that's a tragic story when you consider the sort of what happens to a baby animal that would otherwise spend its lifetime with its mother after witnessing either its mother's slaughter or just being separated in this chaotic event. You can imagine just how much that compromises the animal's well-being. The fact that Smooshi re-imprinted on me is kind of, it's anomalous in that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that you imprint twice on different people, never mind, or different entities, never mind different species. But shit! Now I forgot my.
Don't worry.
And I just said the word seal in French, by the way. Sorry, I didn't swear. It's just
that's
French Canadian.
Okay, you don't know worry on it. Fuck for everyone who's listening. PHOQUE in French is seal in English. So when we were in elementary school,
right?
We would get like, "Hey, go fuck yourself," and I said, "Well, we're only saying go seal yourself," and we'd still get in trouble at school. And while we're on it, Phil. Are you born French, like French or English, or both parents?
Philippe de Mouse. I called my parents maman and papa till I was like 12.
So what's your first language? Is English?
I can make an argument that my first language was French for a period of time in my life. It would eventually. I expressed myself a little better in English. I can use a little bit of practice in French, but I'm still pretty good.
Okay, no, that's amazing.
I still speak French to a lot of relatives.
All right, and for the Americans watching. Quebec is a French province with a 15% allophone, which is Anglo and other population. Ontario, certain places are like 50-50. Where you were brought up, was it 50-50 French or mostly English?
So the city of Welland in south of Niagara had quite a few French people. There's quite a big French community there. Okay. I can't venture to guess what percentage, but it's a tight community. It's people. I still know people that I grew up with. I've had almost 40-year friendships with people at this point.
Okay, very interesting. And I'm going to take one pause right now because I read a comment before, which was hit the notification bell and hit like. More importantly, notifications are not necessarily 100% on my channel. So if everyone is watching, tweet this out and make sure people know that the live stream is going in the event that they didn't get the notification or in the event that they're at the other dead link, which is not working anymore. Okay, so back to where we were, which was the moment of the imprinting. So the imprinting occurred basically like in the earliest days of when Smooshi was brought into Marineland.
Yeah.
And so they put them in holding while they get acclimatized to being in the place before they can even get tired enough to draw blood?
No, they just put them exactly where it is that they're going to live out the remainder of their lives, in these small pools in a warehouse. And because they're not trained, they can't you can't actually get them to follow you. I mean, you have to, the unfortunate reality of training animals is you depend on food and food deprivation, and you require them to be hungry. So you ensure that they have a very small diet, despite the fact that you're also trying to ensure that they're eating at such a young age. You don't want to stunt them, but it's not something we didn't do. But you try to draw them to come out. So eventually, once they would actually follow you out of their holding pen, you can shut the gate behind them so that they're not able to go back into the water. And once they're on this dry land, now you throw the nets on them, and they only weigh about 200 pounds at that point, which sounds like not a lot, I suppose, but it takes 3-4 people to hold them down. And then that's it. You start injecting them and trying to get the blood so you can get at least an initial health assessment. And then over the remainder of their life, you train them so that they're acclimated to actually take the pain of an injection. And you can train them to just voluntarily provide their flipper or their lower spine. There's a couple different places where you can draw blood on a walrus.
Okay, and so the first time you're trying to draw blood, 2-3 other people are holding her down, and you go to put your hands over her eyes, type thing.
No, I just tried to tap her to get her attention and see if I could just draw her away from the sort of chaotic scene. It was kind of a crapshoot luck in the. It was a half wrestling match as well, because she was pretty she was pretty adamant that she wanted to protect the other walrus. But the intention was follow me, and then she did. She did for the rest of our time together. She wouldn't leave my side. It was a crazy thing. But
now, okay, so and just the moment itself, because I can sort of envision this happening, and it's sort of like some sort of, call it a spiritual connection to be a little lofty about it, but a blessing and a curse at the same time. when it happens, do you know that something happened the very minute it happened?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the depths of which it's happened. I just know, hey, look at this. Everywhere I step, she takes her 3 steps to follow me. If I look left, if I look right, she's following me. I juke my hips, she's following me. She's like attentively following me. I've never seen that before. So, you know, you put her back into the house, her house with her other walrus, and you leave and you go have lunch and you talk about it. You say, did you see the way she was following me? That was cool. And then you hear her barking relentlessly in the back, and you're like, oh, that's peculiar. She's never done that before. And then you come out, and suddenly the sound of your voice is triggering her to bark, you know, in this, like, erratically and hectically. And then suddenly, you know, you open the cage one more time, she runs out, and then she smooshes against me. That's how she actually got her name. Her name wasn't Smooshi. Her name was Pumpkin. She became Smooshi because every time I opened the gate, she would come running out. She would smoosh into me. She just wanted to hug. She just wanted to climb on top of me.
Okay, now, I mean, this is the thing, like, when I say a blessing and a curse, at the time, I imagine you love this, it feels good, it feels, I mean, it's cute, it makes you feel good. Do you appreciate, or is there any precedent at the time to the effect that it's not necessarily, while it might be a flattering thing, it's not necessarily the best thing for this to happen for reasons of separation anxiety, that type of stuff?
I love it.
Okay.
I think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I can't believe my luck. I can't believe every day I get to go to work and I've got this like massive, almost bulldog-like figure that is going to protect me against anything in the world and is content to just be beside me as I'm feeding other animals. I mean, it was like having, I mean, it was, I loved it. I mean, even right now, it was the warmest feeling. It was just, there's nothing like it. There was no cuter being on the planet. There was nothing, you know, you go on YouTube now and you go on Twitter and everything's about, you know, the cutest little baby animals. I mean, nothing held water next to Smooshi. Nothing stood a chance next to that animal. It was beautiful and I loved it.
Was she, I mean, look, I don't want to ask a loaded question. Did you notice or think that she was happier than the other walruses because of this connection? Like, did it have an impact on her well-being?
It changed. She was a different walrus than the rest because she didn't have that inherent fear now. She wasn't always sucking her flipper, looking around with big eyes. She wasn't panically swimming. I mean, in our separation, she would, but when we were together, she was ready to explore the world. What can we do next? So her environment became less stressful on account of that. I have to stress in my presence because when I'm gone, that's where the curse aspect of it exists as well, which I would, you know, you come to learn that after basking in the glow of how awesome all of this is, because Smooshi's health wasn't always great.
Okay, and now, so I mean, when you're working there full time, what is your schedule? Are you like 5 days a week, 7 days a week during the season?
5 days a week, but you get longer hours in the summer.
Okay.
It was really quite a dream for me. It was, you know, I had the best days off. Because I had the most seniority. I could just about walk to work. Now, back then I was a little bigger and a little lazier, so that wasn't happening. But nonetheless, I can stroll into work 5 minutes late, having woken up only 6 minutes prior. You know, benefits, you know, steady days. I didn't have midnight shifts. It wasn't anything of the sort. I mean, leaving Marineland, when people say, oh, that must have been tough on account of the animals and everything else, it's like, you know, the everything else part of it is pretty tough too. Yeah.
And by the way, incidentally, if you saw there was a hand over here, that was the documentary cameraman. Just don't think that anyone is stalking over my shoulder. No, that's it. It wasn't my wife. It was okay. So the relationship starts about midway through. When does it become the topic of what's what I'm looking for? Like the topic of discussion. When do third parties start picking up on this and reporting on it?
So the Toronto Star, in mid-February, just prior to Valentine's Day, calls Marineland and inquires on, you know, is there any type of fluff piece we can write for you? Any type of cute relationships that's over there? Anything we can do? We'd like to do a Valentine's Day piece. And one of the PR people says, well, actually, we've got this crazy relationship budding in the trainers department there between this walrus and a trainer. And so I got a call saying, hey, we're doing an interview. You know, the Toronto Star is sending someone there to do an interview about you and Smooshi. I'm like, oh, cool.
February of what year?
Sorry,
February of what year, give or take? February, the year of the imprinting?
I'm going to guess that's 2000. I'm going to guess that's 2000, maybe 8.
Okay, so a couple. It's not right away that this becomes newsworthy or that?
No.
Okay.
It might have been a year. I could be wrong. It could be 2007. Maybe I should have done my homework, but
no,
that's
forget that.
12 years
The only question is, it's not. What I mean to get at is, it's not right away that this becomes a newsworthy item. It's sort of later on, but well before you leave. And
nor is it something that I'm actually actively promoting. Like Marineland later on would suggest all this, like, oh, Phil wants to be a star. Phil wants this, all their allegations, but, it should be noted that they were the ones selling this fluff piece idea, right? Not me.
So whatever the year, Toronto Star contacts Marineland, says, we want to do something good. They say, oh, we've got this amazing story, and it comes down to you. And then sort of what happens after that?
Well, that story becomes another story, becomes a bigger story. Suddenly, Inside Edition are sending a crew down from the States, and suddenly CBC's The National is doing a big story, and then CNN picks it up, and then Jimmy Kimmel does includes it in this monologue, and it's sort of, in the earlier days of what would be considered going viral.
Yeah.
I guess this is what you would call it. 2008 was, while not that long ago, and the internet was still young enough that going viral was like a new thing. It was a new and exciting thing. I started a MySpace page. That's how excited I was.
That dates you and me for the rest of the internet. And if anybody hears, let me just, they're the dogs over there are gonna maybe play a little bit. So if you hear some weird noises, it's just the dogs. So you go viral, story gets out there. I mean, what's the process after that in terms of progression over time?
Well, really nothing. I mean, that just sort of has its cycle, and would eventually pewter off. For me, the opportunity to suddenly use that and the existing footage and everything else as a means to apply for this reality TV show that I see on TV one morning while reheating pizza, I think, oh man, this is Wipeout. Yeah, if you're familiar with the show, it's
for sure.
You run around like
all the time.
Right. So it's it's a ridiculous show. And what's more ridiculous than a man walrus mom? So I figured I'm a shoo-in to be on this show. And, and then I actually thought, and I run around on obstacle courses essentially every day in a wetsuit. This is not much different than working at Marineland, this course. I thought to myself, I'm going to win $50,000. And so I went for it.
That's amazing. I mean, first of all, I remember the show. We used to watch it as a family all the time. And I want to say that I remember you winning, but it might be a sort of a recreated memory. But well done on winning, because it was a pretty absurd show, but it was still required some physical stamina.
That required a lot of mental sort of, I don't know what you would call it, but it's $50,000 if you win, and it's $0 if you get in second place. So, it's a test.
Yeah.
It really was a test. More so than can you handle running around and whatnot? It's more like, can you handle that you're up against a clock and it's 50K or $0?
That's amazing. All right, so you win that. Do you remember the year when you won that? Was that like very shortly before you left?
Yes, very shortly before I left.
Okay.
So my guess is 2010. Then I spent the summer of 2011 there, and then prior to the summer of 2012, I quit.
Okay, and now we're going to get into something of the law. We're going to work our way into the lawsuit slowly. Their position. Hey guys. Okay, their position in their proceedings, and I did the video on it and broke it down, is that you were something of a glory hog. You wanted celebrity status because of this relationship, and you held resentment to them for saying no. What sort of things? The dogs are going crazy, but we're going to ignore it. The good thing is now, without Google Hangouts, the camera doesn't switch back and forth whenever the dogs make a noise, but I'm sure you still hear it. I mean, what happens? Like, give us the context leading to you either deciding to leave, knowing that you were on the outs. Sorry, everybody.
Well, the decision to leave for me wasn't easy, but it was sort of made easy. It was a decision that I thought I would never make. I never had plans to quit Marineland. Did I leave during a period of emotional distress? Yes. Was it an uncalculated move? Yes. Was it an absolutely necessary move? Yeah. I would argue that I don't want to say I'm alive today because of it, but I mean, who knows what dark paths would suddenly be crossed. I mean, I was in a pretty tough place. The decision for me to speak out, here's what happened. So I quit, and suddenly the newspapers start to get interested, because at this point I am the Walrus guy. I'd received enough attention that my quitting sort of became the interest of some media. They started to call me and ask me what was up, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to speak. I'd made an arrangement with Marineland. There was an understanding that, look, I'm quitting, but I still get to stay in Smooshi's life. I don't quit if I can't. And they're like, no, we were going to suggest that. I mean, I suggested, but they were like, no, we would suggest that as well. We want that. We want you you express that you want to go, and by all means leave. But yes, you're welcome back to help the animals, and we hope that we'll call you to help the animals if that's cool with you. And I'm like, that's absolutely cool with me. And in fact, they did so. Shortly after I quit, they called me because the dolphin wasn't eating, and I said, sure, I'll come in and help. And I did. I showed up and gave that dolphin some Valium and whatnot to try to sort of trigger her hunger, and it worked. Mission accomplished on my end. They called me, so I had reasonable reason that they had to believe that they had good faith to keep with that promise. But when I went to revisit Smooshi, a month after quitting, that wasn't the case, and they did everything they could to keep me out. But as fate would have it, nothing was going to keep me out, and so I saw her. I snapped a couple of photos. They exist, and then when the media started to call me, I didn't, on account of that agreement I had with Marineland, I didn't want to speak with them. Now that things had changed, I felt an urgency to speak. I'd seen that Smooshi's condition was such that she was not going to live very long. This was a bad scene, and Marineland were being they weren't honoring our agreement in good faith. Some would tell me they were in fact spitefully not doing so, and that it was calculated to leave me out.
Okay. Now,
so then I called the newspaper. I said, you know what? You put my name, you put my face on every newspaper, and you get the story out. Let's talk. And they sent a video crew, and this would have been in June. So between June and August, I answered some questions with the Toronto Star, and they launched this expose of Marineland on August 15th, 2012, and that's been the beginning of the end for Marineland.
Okay, now I'm going to get back to that, but I realize I may have skipped over a question. When you decide to quit, I don't want to lead you. Why? I mean, I don't know if we covered actually why you made the decision to leave.
I left because I showed up in the morning and I got hit in the face with a smell of chlorine like I hadn't, obviously I was familiar enough with the smell. I knew what it was, but this was next level. And I'd looked over at a manager and I said, how are we going to do this? Like, we were supposed to open the park. The park was going to open in 2 weeks. I'm like, how are we going to open this park? All the animals' eyes are bleeding and the fur's falling out. And I mean, and we're scorching them with chlorine. How are we going to continue to do this? And the manager looked over at me and said, you know what I like about you, Philly? We keep feeding you shit and you keep taking it. And I had only moments prior typed up my 2 week notice and I clicked send. And I said, I'm fucking done.
Okay, and this is when I'm reading the proceedings, this is where my thought process goes, that I don't think many people are beyond redemption or beyond discovering the errors of their ways, but some people are going to say you've been part of the problem for 10 plus years. When does your revelation come where you say this is not the way highly evolved social mammals are intended, it should be kept, it's not humane? Like, when does that moment happen with you?
Okay, so oddly enough, when I first came out, that wasn't what I was advocating for. I was advocating for improved conditions and greater animal protection, because the OSPCA didn't do shit. The Canadian Association of Zoos and Aquarium are completely complicit in the abuse of animals. I had nowhere to turn to help them, and those animals had no standards of care whatsoever by which Marineland could be in non-compliance of. So, I saw glaring holes and gaping wounds in the legal system that was meant to protect animals. So I was advocating to improve those. It wasn't until really interacting with other animal rights people and just coming to learn more of the source of these animals and the global problem the issues. Once you start to look at the depths of the issues, that I started to actually advocate that these animals shouldn't be in captivity whatsoever.
Why? This is while you're employed or after?
This is after I'd quit.
Okay. But so the what's the word I'm looking for? Catalyst, the tipping point where you decide to quit. I mean, had you been having feelings of remorse and guilt leading up to that? I would imagine it's not just a bolt of lightning in 2012, that it's more like a gradual spiritual development from you, or maybe it was a bolt of lightning.
For me, it was a question of how much could I take before enough was enough. It was two choices. Either it was going to break me, or it was going to wake me up in such a way that I'm able to just rebuild myself. I mean, quitting that requires, just quitting any job, especially one where you're working with people that you can argue are like family members and loving animals like you would pets who are arguably family members. Leaving that almost requires some level of rehabilitation. I was disillusioned. I was leaving my dream job. Well, I say dream job, but just an arguably dream scenario. And being spit into a world that I'd already proven I didn't exactly fit into. So
how long did you figure you were on the radar of being the problem employee before you quit? A couple of years, or just one season?
Yeah, it would have been a gradual thing. Maybe I would have been on their radar for maybe in excess of a year, just prior to my going to actually film Wipeout. Things were pretty bad. And I'd been expressing it. In fact, maybe I shouldn't say it. When the lawsuit is resolved, remind me. I have something to say.
Okay, 41 minutes and 41 seconds. I will. That is my reminder. Okay, so you quit. You have an agreement that you're going to be allowed to come see Smooshi, and this is 2012. And the lawsuit is filed 2013. So, walk us through what happens after you leave and right up until the time they file suit against you.
So I speak out and it becomes the subject of international press. It was really a big story. And Marineland in reeling decides to hire PR teams, different, they start to do their thing. They launch their PR campaign. One of the first things that they do, well, bear in mind, it's mid-August when the story comes out. They've still got into mid-October to wrap up their season. They're not going to make any decisions that are going to bring them more negative attention. So they sort of sit on what it is they're going to do in terms of when their retaliation, let's say, begins. But in the meantime, there are several demonstrations at Marineland that are now, one of which was in excess of 1,000 people. We're talking some big events. One of which, a lot of people stormed Marineland and sort of busted through the gates and stormed a dolphin show. And I can only speak of what I witnessed, which is all available on YouTube, because I was in fact not one of the people who did such a heinous thing. But I was actually on the lawn on public property. I seen when the people were storming, and I'll admit that I just being the type of person who enjoys a lot of these heightened sort of things, these heightened states of excitement, I wanted to run in there, believe me. But I elected to stay on the lawn. In fact, I grabbed Rick O'Barry, who's another activist. I said, you and I should stand over here. So there's a lot of things that happened that sort of pissed Marineland off. So once the season wrapped up, the first thing they did, at this point I'd been advocating publicly for greater animal protections and whatnot. I'm mingling with politicians. I'm doing talk radio. I'm doing morning TV shows. I'm getting quite a bit of press. Marineland fires my girlfriend. And I can't say that we didn't know it was coming, but, fuck them for doing it in the way they did it. And some months later, they actually sued her. She was the first one sued. She was the first person sued. So they sued her for $1 million+. So
On
We
what?
get the press.
I didn't read her lawsuit. What's the general basis for the lawsuit against her? Was it protesting?
They sued her for defamation for comments that she made in a Toronto Star article regarding the killer whale. They didn't actually include any of the quotes in the story itself, but that lawsuit was never intended to go anywhere. It was only intended to bring financial hardships to us, and to, this was, again, in Marineland's mind, a good PR move. But again, that lawsuit had absolutely no basis, no legal basis whatsoever. It was maybe arguably worst crafted than the pile of shit and paper that you've got in front of you. But
before,
as intended, that lawsuit worked in silencing Christine, because we couldn't afford to actually see that lawsuit through, and it damn near made us broke.
Just to get back to the Toronto Star articles, the ones where you gave them an interview and then they ran with it in August, those articles, or the research, the investigative journalism, I imagine, was not started in August or July. That had been that their project, as far as you know, was it going on for an extended period of time, or was it that summer type thing?
Well, my participation would have started in late June of 2012, so only 2 months prior to the story. But yeah, even when I worked at Marineland, I was getting emails. I know there was a number of, there's always been someone investigating Marineland. It was just a question of who had the stones to actually put something to paper. And for some reason, this time someone did.
Okay, so Toronto Star goes public with their expose in August. With this big protest where people storm, when is that? I think I know the date, but
I'll say August. I'll say October. I'll say October 12th or 17th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's when it was. But it was basically the end of the season of the 2000 season.
And this is the one where, in their proceedings against you, they talk about how these activists under your control storm and scare children in strollers and all this stuff. That was the catalyst protest that they mentioned in their proceedings?
In a plot to steal a walrus, yes.
Okay. And this is the one where, in your proceedings, you sort of allege that this is when it confirmed in the mind of John Holer, who was the founder and owner at the time, that you were... We're going to get to this. I have questions about the logistics of stealing a walrus, even if it were to be a movie that Hollywood made, but we're going to get there. It's this protest where apparently John Holer sees you on the grass and is convinced, according to you, that you're the mastermind behind all of Marineland's woes.
Well, this is what was crafted in a lawsuit. I don't know to say that that's what happened, but yeah, of course I became the attention, the person that they were targeting.
Okay, so
Marineland's vengeful. Someone was going to eat it. Someone was going to eat it.
Now, and this is where, I mean, it took us some time to get here, but now we're going to get into the legal side of this, because this is where my mind as a lawyer, I have trouble getting around what's going on. They sue Christine, your girlfriend, before you or after you?
Before.
Before, for $1 million plus for defamation.
1.25.
1.25. They sue you in February 2013, $1+ million for defamation.
No, they didn't sue me in defamation. They sued me for, I think it's like a business interference tort.
Business interference and disrupting their business.
Right.
Okay. What was the question? Have you ever been sued before? Had you ever been taken to court before this?
I've only ever been in the courtroom as a witness when I was a child, was shooting at me and friends with a BB gun. And so I had to go into a courtroom and speak on account of my experience. And I remember sweating in excess because I was nervous, having no reason to be.
Okay, I'm going to try to get the lighting a little bit. It's not going to work.
Prior to that, I suppose it'd be a good time now to stress that in my life, I've not so much as received so much as a seatbelt infraction, a ticket for a seatbelt. I did get a parking ticket the other day. That's now the extent and the length of my legal rap sheet. There you go.
A parking ticket.
Now Marineland's got something to work with.
A parking ticket, a $1.5 million lawsuit is the extent of your litigation experience. Okay, so you, at the time you get sued, I mean, I'm gonna just state the obvious. You have no idea what you're getting, what you've been pulled into as far as the process of litigation is.
No, I'm very naive that the truth is going to save me.
Okay.
I've been reminded repeatedly that they can't sue you. Just keep telling the truth. I'm like, if that's all I got to do, then how can I lose?
Well,
No, sorry. No, the logic wasn't how can I lose? It was how can I be sued?
yeah, well, Phil, I'll tell you, I've said it a dozen times in my vlogs. You don't need a good reason to sue someone, and you can't prevent someone from suing you, really, even if it's the most outlandish, frivolous thing on earth. But we'll get there. So you get sued. Now, the procedure under Ontario law, you get served by bailiff with these proceedings. I mean, first of all, as a human who has never been sued before, you open this up, and I mean, what is your reaction getting served with a lawsuit?
That's not how it happened. I find out because my phone is glowing because the media is reporting a story that I've been sued, and that I'm going to be on the front page. I'm going to be on the front page of all these newspapers, and amidst my answering phone calls and everything else because of all the chaos, newspapers. So unbeknownst to me, what a reporter will do. Let's say a less than responsible reporter will do a phone call. So they may just let that phone ring one time and send you a very quick request for an interview via some social media. And when they don't get their answer within a minute and a half, they write the story without your quotes. So amidst all this chaos that I didn't know, I suppose that there was some story coming out. But yeah, I found out through the media. Christine found out through the media as well. We never so much as received cease and desist. We had no inclination that Marineland was going to sue us. We had no, we had some interactions with Marineland where they would send the police to our home. We knew that they didn't like us, and we knew that Christine had been fired after she refused to sign a document saying that she didn't witness animal abuse at Marineland. But we never imagined we were being sued. We were telling the truth. How can we be sued?
Okay, so no letter of demand, no cease and desist, whatever the concept is, but no letter saying you have done X, Y, and Z. Stop doing it. Failing which, we will sue you by X, Y, and Z date. No, nothing like that. The first thing you get is a lawsuit, but you only find out about it through the media before actually getting the proceedings.
Yeah, I hadn't even read it yet, and that was the most nerve-wracking thing because I'm like, oh, what have I done? Like, what? I'm looking back, saying, in my naive mind, I'm like, did I say something that isn't true or that isn't fact? Like, did I get a number of whales that have died wrong? Like, what could it be? What could I have? Where did I slip up? And then one day, knock, knock, knock at the door, and I went and I answered the door, and there's that
bailiff,
that gentleman with the stack of papers, and Phil Demers. It's like, yeah, you've been served or whatever they say. Have a nice day. I'm like, okay. I mean, I'll admit, for a moment, I felt like saying, and I would eventually in other scenarios, but I felt like saying, what took so long? but I didn't. But I'll tell you something. A rush of relief came over me when I actually opened the claim and read it. I thought, oh, this is just so absurd. This is going to be kind of fun, I think.
Okay, but now, and this is where I want to get like the practical legal side of it. Once you get served under Ontario procedure, you have 30 days to get a lawyer to file an appearance, or just to announce that you're going to defend.
An intent to defend, and then you've got time to then you've got to craft your statement of defense and or counterclaim if you intend to sue as well. So that comes with some level of some time limit, I assume.
Okay, and now you go, and now you have to go get a lawyer.
Yeah, that's not a fun thing, by the way. And it's not the first time I've had to do it. I would eventually have to do it a number of times, but that's not fun, and under a lot of pressure too. You don't know what the hell you're doing. I've never been sued before. I didn't know where to turn. I put my faith in sort of, I'd hope the journalists who'd sort of exposed, who'd done the story would, I thought by virtue of the fact that the story was so big that lawyers would be jumping at me, maybe. I don't know what the hell, I don't know how to do this. How do you get a lawyer? I know that they cost money. So I'm told, just write $5,000 checks to lawyers. That's how you get a lawyer. Eventually I would have one recommended through another lawyer. And this was someone that was going to work for a more reasonable price. He believed in the cause. And so that was music to my ears. So I retained a gentleman by the name of Kevin Toyne. He
And
would be best known for being the IKEA monkey lawyer, for those who remember.
I do not know what the IKEA monkey lawyer is. Well,
come on, you talk about legal matters on the internet in Canada, and you don't know about the IKEA monkey?
Of course I do. Give me 1 second to. No,
I look forward to that one.
Okay, well, I'm going to put that on my to-do list. Okay, so you get. I mean, first of all, how many lawyers have you had in this file?
Well, at this point on this file, this would be my third, but I've had 4 lawyers.
And I mean, because it's been going on for so long, I say to myself, like, I've been in files where lawyers literally die, and then the file gets dragged on a little more, and the file's been going on for 5 years. Witnesses die, people move. I need to know. I need to understand how this took 6+ years, and have you not had depositions or examinations, discoveries on the merits of the case yet?
So what ensued from my being sued and my putting up a defense to the lawsuit? Remember, Marineland didn't sue me with the intent of actually having to make any type of arguments in any court. It was just to shut me up. Like, we're gonna crush this guy. But I kept sustaining. I kept I got a lawyer. I got other people lawyer. I started cutting those $5,000 checks for everyone that was being sued. I mean, I had that $50,000 from Wipeout by virtue of having that relationship with the Walrus. It was easy for me to cut these checks, even to people I didn't know, because that money shouldn't have been mine without the Walrus. I had an obligation to do something with that money. So, I started cutting checks.
Yeah.
I forget, I lost my train of thought.
$5,000 for a lawyer lasts a month. So I mean, you're going to burn.
Yeah, it doesn't last very
long. But so now,
what happened is, I sustained. I continued to sustain. Marineland, they vowed, through lawyers, to fight me at every corner possible, at every effort of mine whatsoever to sustain the lawsuit. They were going to complicate matters. This was a promise. I guess there's sometimes talks between parties that are sort of candid and then there's times when you gotta insert a level of decorum to it all. Well, amidst the not so decorated conversations, Marineland's promise was, hey, Mr. Holler is a multi-millionaire. We can drag this out forever. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's exactly what's happened. So my first fight was, beyond drafting the statement of defense and counterclaim, was we wanted to examine Marineland's owner. We wanted to examine John Holler. He was the man who ultimately is the lone controlling mind of Marineland. In fact, he had the heavy hand in much of the things that were happening at Marineland. He was driving past my house. He has a history of violence. He was sending people to my house. He was making my life very uncomfortable. He was promising things that were uncomfortable of me. So felt right for me to if I want to have the best possible case and defense, I feel like the corporate representative that would best help me is to examine John Holler. Well, that fight took years and an absurd amount of money, but we won that right.
Okay, but hold on. Actually, let me stop you there, because this might be going too fast for people who are not familiar with the legal process. You get sued. You get served with a statement of claim or whatever, motion to institute proceedings, a lawsuit. You file the intent. You file your appearance or notice of intent to file a defense. You have the right to examine a representative of the plaintiff, and I imagine under Ontario law you can do it before or after you file a defense, or do you know?
No. I don't know what the law is, but I'd filed my counterclaim and defense long before any intention to examine.
Okay, so you file your counterclaim and defense. You file your defense and counterclaim, where you countersue for stress, defamation, all the stuff.
I countersued for defamation and for abuse of process.
Yeah. And then comes time now where you got to pick. You get it's a legal right. You get to examine a representative of the person suing you, and they get to examine you. So, right off the bat, do you say you announce your intention to examine John Holler personally, or do you?
No, Marineland runs the show from this point on. They send hyper-aggressive letters on a weekly to daily basis, always amidst the entirety of this lawsuit, threatening me with additional lawsuits, trying to, doing everything that they can to complicate matters. And so, they immediately say, okay, we're sending this representative, and we're starting examinations on this date. And we say, no, we don't want that. Well, we got to file a motion. That's how this works. So then suddenly, you know, and has been the entirety of this lawsuit, is a bunch of motions. And so we file a motion. I don't even know what the very first motion was. I don't know that the very first motion we won was in fact to examine John Holer. We'd gone to court a number of times now, but we would eventually win the right to examine John Holer. And then for this next couple of years, while simultaneously fighting to have case management, because the lawsuit on too many occasions has just gone so sideways that I actually fought and won in order to have the case managed. You know, a bunch of no-shows would ensue. Marineland, John Holer he would not show up to his examinations. We got, I believe we have 3 certificates of non-attendance, and, you know, a bunch of times we let him, you know, on consent, not show up to examinations. So, you know.
So hold on, and if we back it up, what was their basis for refusing John Holer and proposing someone else? They say John Holer doesn't have material knowledge. This witness is better.
No, so they argued that this was a personal vendetta against him, and that I was trying to like abuse an elder of sorts. Like I was just trying to ridicule him and expose his, you know, put him up, you know, just try to stress him and stuff. They made a bunch of arguments that I had made this personal against him.
Okay, and your position is, I mean, your lawyer's position presumably is, I get to examine the representative of my choice. If I choose wrong, my tough, and I'll live with it.
He sued me.
Sued me. Well, it's a corporate entity suing you, so you get to pick your representative. And I imagine, I mean, I presume your lawyer argued, look, we get to pick who we want. We think this guy has the most material knowledge. If we're wrong, we'll live with our decision and we'll go to trial with a bad examination because we chose the wrong witness. At least that's the way it works in Quebec. So
we never stood that chance. We never had the chance to choose a representative. We had to force Marineland's hand, and then they just played a cat and mouse game until the owner would eventually die, and then we were back at square one with the same. I don't want to describe.
Well, the same witness they originally proposed. Okay, now I mean, what sort of things are?
Sorry.
I was going to say, well, like, what if you don't know the types of motions? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how it goes for 5 years without depositions. Like, what sort? They saw
7 years.
Function, right? They saw
7 years.
7 years, and you have to do the examinations on the merits. For the first few years, before you get case management, and for those of you who don't know what case management is, that I imagine under Ontario law, it's one judge who's going to oversee the case going forward basis to make sure that the timetable is respected.
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
That's not the case in my example.
But prior,
we lost our first case management judge at a crucial time. He was taken to he was put on a different file, and so we had to hit the reset button again, and that further delayed and complicated matters for me.
And prior to getting the first case management judge, that's you're a few years into the process, and whenever you go to court, you're landing on a different judge who doesn't know anything about the file type thing.
It's a bit of a rotating staff of judges, yeah, but I mean, for the most part, we had one consistent judge. But you know, what would more often happen is Marineland would threaten with motions up until the point of even having us show up to court. And then what would happen is once we got to court, we would agree on something before actually seeing the judge. You know, it'd be an argument over a timetable or an argument over, I mean, literally just these little petty things, but they were just prepared to fight tooth and nail at all accounts, and would force me to send a lawyer from Toronto. Often enough, we'd actually send an agent lawyer to save us money, a local lawyer to go there. I mean, you know, it's just been all part of their game plan. It's just been exactly what they promised. A fight every step of the way. And all I'm trying to do is defend. You know, this isn't me pursuing Marineland. This is them pursuing me, and me having a desire to clear my name and to, you know, force them to prove their allegations, which is virtually impossible.
Okay, so now you get the case management judge for the first time. The judge is put on another file, and then you have to go back to get a new judge for case management just to make sure that this file starts.
We show up with a fresh round of issues, and we have a court date. And when we show up on that court date, it just benefits Marineland a little bit that the judge is new on the file and wants to take a little bit of time before she digests to properly digest it and then move forward. And so, you know, on that particular court date, we just got delayed for, you know, much of the matters that were going to be heard.
Now, and I imagine the issues are, I mean, I imagine they're procedural issues. The dates of the examinations, how long you get to examine for, who you get to examine, by what date you have to file a response. Are there these types of
multiple rounds of that? Multiple rounds of that. The timetable has been breached a number of times.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is. I don't think my wife hasn't even seen all of my videos because I put out a lot, but like this is something I talk about in previous vlogs where it's a situation of hurry up and wait. You prepare for motions, you get to court, no judge hears you, you got to reschedule, you got to re-prep, you get in front of a judge, you run out of time, you got to come back when the judge has more time. Phil, I once had a lawsuit. We went to trial and it was scheduled for 5 days. And after 5 days, the plaintiff principal witness hadn't even finished testifying. We have to reschedule, but the judge who heard the case is not free for another 6 months. So we schedule another 5 days, 6 months down the line. We burned through those 5 days. It was a 18-day trial, I think, or maybe 12, 15-day trial over a year and a half. And people don't understand like how short a court day is and what happens when you get to court. Like, okay, so just to explain the nature of it, where was it? Oh, request for particulars. I don't know if this is the term in Ontario, but you mentioned that you've communicated a bunch of documents, like hundreds of pages of documents, I think.
So one of the arguments is Marineland had examined me and then they asked for more particulars. And so my then lawyer said, give them everything. Just give them absolutely everything you have. So after that order came through, we produced an additional like hundreds of pages because I was literally giving every conversation I had with every person. You know, I mean, it's quite a thing. You know, maybe it wasn't the greatest move, but you know, we just want to appease the courts and expedite this thing as quickly as possible. So I literally gave them. You may as well have handed my phone and computer to Marineland. May as well have. And at this point, I've received exactly 0 from them.
And now, for those people who don't know what particulars are, when you conduct an examination, you can do it beforehand by a letter. You say, we want to examine, and in order for the examination to go productively, give us this documentation in advance so that we don't have to ask for it during the examination and then get it and then bring back the witness. So sometimes lawyers ask for it in advance. In my experience, you don't get it because lawyers say, work for your results. But so they examine you, they say, give us email correspondence between X, Y, and Z, text messages between X, Y, and Z. You go back, you give it to them. Have you made I presume you've made a similar request of the opposing party and have not gotten a follow-up on it?
Any of the follow-ups that in fact did happen was met with, of course, you know, refusals and whatnots. Our most recent court date, Marineland had to admit that they didn't have 9 of 11 heads of damage. They didn't have receipts or proof particulars for 9 of 11 heads of damage. So after at the nearly the 6-year mark of this litigation, and me just doing everything I can to just get Marineland in court, we finally did. And you know, they had to admit a number of things. Embarrassingly,
anything that goes on in open court, unless it's in camera or confidential, is public. For anyone who's interested, you can go to court and just pick a courtroom, sit in there and watch what goes on. And it's like the best learning process anybody can have: lawyer, paralegal, stagiaire, or ordinary citizen. Okay, let me get to my notes because I want to make sure I'm not skipping any part of this.
Did you just process that properly? 9 of 11 heads of damage they have no documents for.
Well, I mean,
so when they say, "Hey, you broke our fence and it cost us this much to replace," and then we say, "Okay, well, we'd like to see the particulars on that. How many employees worked on it? Their pay stubs. We'd like to see this." They just say, "It's an estimate. We don't have any of those things." It's like, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, I noticed when you have a flat $1 million damages that is not particularized, and then you have to actually justify the damages, I can anticipate it being difficult to quantify some of the damages of interrupting a show and scaring kids in strollers during a protest. But you know, yeah, it was non-particularized lump sums, which you get to trial and you know it's going to be difficult to substantiate. So it's not. I mean, I process it. It's par for the course for law. It's amazing. Okay, so now you file your original defense and counterclaim 2013, and you recently amended it. The version that I did the video on was dated 2018, and that was an amendment. That was an amended version to respond to their amended statement of claim.
Indeed, yeah, and it was an opportunity for me to catch up on the file because now we were able to include a lot of the abuses of process that have happened within action over the last 6.5 years. So it was actually it was something I've been looking forward to for a long time. Marineland fought to actually allow us to file it. They didn't let us file it, and so we had to actually win a motion in court to get an order for Marineland to file it.
Yeah, I presume it was called a motion for permission to amend, because if they oppose amendments, I'm speaking from a Quebec law perspective, so I assume it's relatively similar, but there's a rule in law that you can amend your proceedings as often as you like, to the extent that it's useful and not contrary to the ends of justice. And by contrary to the ends of justice, there's a whole slew of criteria, but like, if you want to add details or change numbers, you can amend. If you want to add a new defendant 5 years in, sometimes you're going to have difficulty doing that, but even under Quebec law, it can be done. Now, you can amend as much as you want, but the other party can oppose amendments if they say, or if they allege that they are contrary to the ends of justice, and I presume that's what happened, which, for anybody who's a lawyer, can appreciate the absurdity of a party, let's just say a plaintiff, amending their claim and then opposing the defendant's ability to amend, to respond to those amendments. I mean, it's litigation.
I've got a term for you. It's called abuse of process.
It is. The problem in Quebec is that abuse of process is so difficult to establish. I mean, I've argued it in multiple cases. We've gotten it in some, but it's
in those cases where they're sending police to your house because of tweets on multiple occasions.
No, let's get to that. But let me adjust this mic, which is whatever. I'm going to leave it there. It's going to look like a third nipple. You can call me Krusty the Clown. No, don't do it. It's okay. It's okay. I'll just bring it back up here. Okay, good enough. You might hear some noise. The tweet, and let's get to this. Now, we may be of the same vintage here, Phil. Do you know what the Anarchist Cookbook is?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so I grew up, and we had the Anarchist Cookbook, and there was even like, it was a ridiculous book because it taught you how to do things which were conceptually possible. Well, whatever. It taught you things that you would never do, but they're conceptually possible. When I was sort of following your Twitter feed when you tweeted the "Life is short, steal a walrus," and then I saw the CBC article to the effect that police came to your house to investigate because that was deemed to be a provocative tweet. They are accusing you in the proceedings of having plotted to steal a walrus. To steal, not a walrus, to steal Smooshi. I need to know something, and maybe you don't know, but how much does Smooshi weigh?
I mean, I'm hoping she weighs 2,000 pounds, but there's no way of my knowing. But it'd be nice if she weighed maybe 2,500 pounds.
I need to know the logistics. Just assuming that someone wanted to do it as an act of activism to gain attention with no interest in the well-being of the walrus. Logistically, what would one have to do to kidnap a walrus?
Are you me or are you anyone else in the world?
Well, okay, not you who could lead it out by hand, but not even that. Even say lead it out by hand. 2,500-pound walrus. Is it the size of a horse?
She fits through a man door.
Say that again?
She can fit through a man door.
A man door, like a human door.
She can get her way through.
Okay, and then would she go in a flatbed truck? Like an F-150?
Is she following me or is she following strangers?
I'm just saying, physically, could one crane a thing and put it in an F-150 flatbed?
When I used to put her in the back of trucks and drive around the park with her, I just jumped in the back of the truck and I'd put a step out and she would use that step to jump into the back of the truck.
Okay, and now what sort of environment do they require, temperature-wise, hydration-wise, in order to actually not die?
Everything that Marineland can't provide.
Now,
they need cool temperatures. They need cold water, salt water. They need to eat mollusks. They need to be able to forage the bottom of the sea and hunt and have a purpose in life. They need natural lighting. They need fresh air. They need all of the things that I cannot possibly provide as a responsible caretaker, much like Marineland as an irresponsible caretaker can't provide. So any kidnapping a walrus mission would be, I mean, from a practical level, the idea of kidnapping a walrus would kill it. I can't think of any. You'd have to be able to get it to another facility with all of these things in order for it to not die, right? So, like, practically speaking, kidnapping a walrus is tantamount to killing it. It would probably be best if we just all everyone accept that it's virtually impossible to steal a walrus.
Okay.
It's not gonna happen. It's impossible. Well, wait. Safe for
the walrus.
Safe for maybe me, but I would never. It's absurd.
Well,
it would be as absurd as anyone else trying. Stupid. Just stupid.
All right, and I imagine anyone with reasonable experience of walruses would know that this is like you can't. It might. It's not like stealing the dolphin. I mean, it might be as absurd as stealing the dolphin in Ace Ventura type thing.
I think if we all recognize this for what it is, everyone wins. Marineland sought to use the media and the courts as a means to defame me legally and to make me look out to be this absurd character as a means to discredit me. Somehow, somewhere along the lines, it made sense. Now, bear in mind, there was the history of media with me and the Walrus, so there's obviously an association there, so that it's something that they would have had to have addressed. But somewhere, someone thought, oh, here's a good idea. Let's say he was plotting to steal her. And that just wound up being the biggest mistake they could have possibly made.
So I mean,
aside from just suing me.
I just would like that. I mean, these are
firing my girlfriend and abusing animals.
Well, here's the question I would ask as an attorney. I'm logistically, if I wanted to illustrate the absurdity of this, how many stairs could a 2,500-pound walrus walk up on her own?
Walk up many. Walk down 3.
All right. How much? I mean, what does a walrus eat?
Well, Marineland, they eat herring and capelin, and if they're lucky enough, squid. But in the wild, they would just forage the bottom of the sea. I mean, whatever's there, essentially mollusks and clams and mussels. But they're also a bit, they're scavengers. So if there's something dead down there and they find it delicious, they'll eat it.
Okay. And how many pounds of food does a walrus eat in a day?
Oh, so I mean, different parts of season. I mean, different species of walrus, different parts of the world. Smooshi should eat about 30 pounds, I would guess. I mean, that would even be maybe a low end. But I worked there while they were a little younger. So, it's been a number of years. At 15 years old, she should be eating more than what she was. So, maybe between 30 and 50 pounds a day.
And how much pee and poo do they expel on a daily basis? Do they
enough to require a high-pressure hose and a full staff to clean?
Okay. I mean, it's just because the idea of stealing a walrus really seems like more of an activist, and I'm not saying this to be inflammatory. It seems like an activist murder mission. Like, yeah, we're going to kill the walrus and bring maximum attention to this. And in a Die Hard type movie, that might make sense. Your relationship with Smooshi is not one to willingly, knowingly, directly or indirectly bring her about any sort of harm or risk. I mean, it's a loaded question, but I'm stating the obvious, right?
Of course. Also, and this is worth noting because it's obvious, as what Marineland describes me as a radical animal rights activist, I have exactly zero history of having participated in any animal rights activism whatsoever. You would think, as such a radical animal rights activist that's able to control people, that have some history of it, some example of my radicalized efforts, but there's nothing out there. It's all fiction. And the notion that I would steal a walrus to, I don't know what was the purpose? Did they say to bring attention to her?
Well, I mean, I that's what activists, are after, I presume. So.
Well, Marineland keeps citing all these crazy animal activists and all these and whatnot and all these crazy things that they've alleged against us and myself that I would be doing. But where's the history of anything actually ever happening against Marineland? They can't actually note a single solitary incident that activists have been involved in that have compromised in any capacity the well-being of animals. In fact, in the opening day of this season, they tried to allege that animal activists were responsible for a bit of a catastrophe that happened in the park with the deers. And, eventually everyone would learn that was not, in fact, the case. It was just a couple of idiot guesses because, quite frankly, people that are going to chase deer at Marineland, let's call them what they are, idiots.
Do you know that Smooshi is still alive?
I do know that Smooshi is still alive, yes.
Does she still perform?
She's currently performing, yes. Okay,
and you posted, I think it was you or someone else, you may have retweeted it, but there was a video of an emaciated-looking walrus performing tricks in the heat of summer. Was that Smooshi that I saw, or was that another walrus?
That was Smooshi, yeah. I mean, there's a number of things that I've tweeted, but most recently I did tweet a live broadcast from in Marineland of Smooshi. I also tweeted just a general video of her. You know, we had it, and they are forcing her to perform more than ever, and they are certainly using food deprivation to do it because. The video speaks for themselves. It's her with her face next to the bucket and them forcing her to wave, dance, wave in the hot sun so that 75 people can clap. Sorry, I'm going to plug in my phone because we're at the hour and something mark.
No, and I actually noticed it started getting choppy, so it'll give me time to double check my notes and make sure.
I'm going to move the phone sideways. Let's see. Does that work at your end? Is that fine? It hasn't compromised anything?
Let me see. No, it still looks good. Okay, good. I tried to turn off notifications and I'm still hearing them, but no, you're good. You're okay, you're still there. Now I wanted to get to something. You mentioned it during the Joe Rogan. It was in terms of like a resolution. Now, I don't want to get into settlement discussions or anything, so let me just say that. You mentioned, that this narrative could change easily if Marineland were open to discussing the idea. Now, the legislation recently passed. You actually talk about the legislation that you and the others actually were actively promoting that got passed in June regarding prohibitions on whales in captivity now.
So, we should note that since the latest Rogan podcast, Smooshi is the last surviving walrus. So at the time, I'd been discussing that 2 walruses were still alive. That's no longer the case. Only Smooshi is alive. And we were talking about the possibility of a pending legislation to be passed, and it's in fact received royal ascension. And so now Bill S-203 has passed and is law in Canada, which prohibits the importation, exportation, basically the captivity of whales, dolphins, and porpoises in Canada, and the breeding, of course. However, the animals that Marineland currently have been grandfathered in, so they're able to keep the animals they have. They're not able to breed any beyond the ones that were already pregnant, of which this season there were 5, and to the best of my knowledge, there still remains 1 or 2 pregnant belugas. That will bring their number, or should, to total number to 56 belugas. Any beluga whale born thereafter will be deemed, it'll be a criminal act and subject to some pretty heavy fines and whatnot. So we're watching Marineland.
So
we're the cops.
I don't know how beluga whales get impregnated. Does it happen if they're naturally kept, a male and a female, or is it something that requires artificial insemination and a whole
there's a number of ways. Well, let's say there's 2 ways of doing it: naturally and unnaturally, which would include artificial insemination. Nothing that Marineland's ever done, nothing that any facility would participate in doing with Marineland, and nothing that Marineland can now legally do anyways, because we took that ability away from them.
Well, the law is, the law, it seems like one of those laws that is about time laws. The grandfathering in means that all remaining captive animals are going to die in captivity, and they'll be the last generation of captive animals. But does impregnation, can it happen by accident if you have a male and a female and they just happen to be at that time of the month, I guess? Like, can a fur... So
that would, if that were to happen, it would be Marineland's responsibility, and they would be in breach of Canadian law. So
okay,
it can happen.
It can happen.
Now, it should be noted, Marineland's making a conscious effort. They've separated animals. I've been told there's a bit of a panic in-house on account of that. I'm very proud of that. But yeah, so they're sort of reeling at that end, and they also know that we are watching very, 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 very.
People are going to think we just started skipping. Okay, so now when you said there's a way to change the narrative, we've entered a new realm of knowledge of these animals, and that it's not something that should be tolerated. And setting aside settlement discussions, do you foresee the possibility, if the openness is there, to actually here, the lens was covering the... Anyone saw it, that was the hood of a lens covering the
I thought it was a dog's face.
No, the dog's touch would have been very good. Would you be open to that type of thing? Like, I can see that, setting aside their dispute with you, Marineland is on the beginning of a new world and the end of the old world, where, you know, a lot of headway and a lot of goodwill is there to be gained if there's sort of a voluntary compliance, not just with the law, but with the morality that is broader than the law. If they said one day, how do we want to change our image and we want to actually be part of the solution and not part of the problem? Are you open to that? Is that even on the table, or is this there
is a scenario that exists where I would be happy to resolve all matters between Marineland and I. Absolutely. Shy of that arrangement, which I feel is actually quite generous. Is quite generous. Shy of that, then I want trial. I want to twist their arm until it breaks off.
Okay, now this is another thing which I've been thinking of, and a lot of people say, like, okay, just release it into the wild. What's the big deal? And then on Joe Rogan, you were talking about like some exorbitant costs in the release. What first of all, can Smooshi ever be released into the wild with the mildest chance of success to live? No,
it would not be in her best intention. That would be certain death. No, she needs to be under human care. She needs to be in a place where the weather is accommodating to her. So I would prefer personally, or I see that perhaps the west coast of either Canada or the States could work, because the climate is a little more fair. She needs to be in a display only, so no shows. Don't force her to perform. She needs to just be under human care. She needs for me to be available to help her and be a part of her life, because it's in her best interest and in her health and well-being's best interest. She needs all of those things. All of that would appease me enough to walk away from Marineland with a handshake, even a hug. But that evidently doesn't seem to be in their plans. At this point, I would venture to guess that they have different plans, because they should almost look at getting rid of my lawsuit as just a convenient bonus for them, because on account of the fact that Smooshi is the last animal there, and because she brings so much attention to Marineland, negative attention, and the obviously the potential for a greater deal of negative attention, you'd think that they would just make the right move, almost purely based on the ethics of it all.
Yeah.
She is an animal that needs other animals of her species. Send her to an appropriate facility, and as a bonus, I walk away, because this has been essentially what I'd hoped for over the course of the last 7 years. So to me, it seems like an awesome resolution. And look at me, I'm on board to exchange hugs and kisses when it's all said and done.
I mean, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't. I mean, what is a walrus worth? And not in terms of, like, I'm trying to think of a way to say it, not like what's she worth, but how much could they sell it for? How much money does Smooshi as an attraction bring into Marineland? What would be the dollar value to make it in their financial interest to find her?
So Smooshi's a difficult example, because she's a unique animal, because she can both she represents the potential of a great deal of income to a facility. She also brings with her the potential of a great deal of risk. So when you say what's a walrus worth, I say I would hope that it's worth not losing your legacy business over. That's the way I see it. Dollar figures aside, what does Marineland want? Do they want $100,000 for the animal? Do they want to spare themselves of millions of dollars of loss? I mean, there's multiple incentives as to why they should move this animal, and the first one, in their interest, of course, would be financial. So I think it's just foolish of them to risk that animal dying at the park.
Well, and I promise
them I'm going nowhere, and if must be, and I'll just, at this point, I just reiterate that I'm just going to continue the path of reducing them to rubble. So,
I mean, well,
I've weaponized their lawsuit at this point. They don't want to go to court. It's not that they don't want to go, because it's not so much that they don't want to go and not have to disclose everything else and the risk that comes with that. It's the PR that comes with it. we're gonna have the eyes of the world watching this thing. I'm turning into this hype machine, and my job is to hype the boringest thing on the planet, a trial. Can you imagine? But
I'll tell you.
I'd say I'm doing a pretty good job of it. I got a lot of eyes.
Well,
and a lot
what I
of
find
keen on seeing this thing through.
Well, no. So a number of things I find interesting is a lot of the American side of my subscriber base on YouTube had not heard of this. It seems that the consensus is virtually unanimous, and I'm being, cynical. It's unanimous that people who have seen the videos on the lawsuits know which way they're siding on this, and it doesn't seem that many people are saying Marineland is in the right. Now, there's the court of public opinion, and then there's the actual court. And, like I can tell you, the court might say you've done one thing wrong in this, which legitimizes, if only 10% of the claim, but it legitimizes the claim to the point where it wasn't absolutely frivolous, and it can sort of undermine your counterclaim. They can find you wrong on one thing, and then things can go differently from there. But, if I'm going by the reaction of people in comments, even if that were to happen, the people who pay and who give money to Marineland are not being convinced, and are not probably going to be convinced by a lawsuit. So, I say that give Smooshi away and market that act of generosity in a way that would bring Marineland exponentially more money than maintaining this lawsuit, maintaining her as a show that I don't know of anybody who's going to go to Marineland specifically to see the walrus. I imagine you're already out in Niagara Falls and you'll go there whether they have a walrus or not, but you'd certainly be more inclined to go there if you didn't feel guilty about bringing your kids there and showing them what cruel treatment of highly social animals are, if that's what you believe. And the funny thing is, I say, I like zoos, and I go to zoos often with my kids. We went to San Diego, and we go to the big zoos, and you really get a feel very quickly for a zoo that is able to care for the animals and one that is not. And we went, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to mention a name, but we went to a prominent zoo in a big city, and there was no business for them to have certain animals. One of the animals was a giraffe in an enclosure that was half the size of my kitchen. And the backdrop was a painting on a mural of the African savannah, and the giraffe is sitting there wagging its head to side with the obvious signs of distress. And everyone in my family were we're depressed after going to this zoo, and we're never going to go back. Whereas when
people go to Marineland, when people go to Marineland and they see the lone killer whale, some are reduced to tears. It's that bad. I wish that Marineland in some capacity could, for themselves and really, quite frankly, for others, do some type of gesture in goodwill, just something to just show that, just to offer some semblance of being capable of being reasonable. I mean, everything that they've done at this point is just been laughably absurd. To send the police to my house over a tweet, what a gift! Well, an absolute dream.
What I loved was the media coverage, which was. The word incredulous is not the right word, I don't think, because I used that and someone corrected me. But the media was not convinced by the response, the measuredness of that response to the tweets. Now, what was I going to say? One other thing. Yeah, sorry. What animals, of the animals you have the highly social, highly developed mammals, you have the walrus, you have the killer whales. What animals can be returned to the wild after prolonged stints or prolonged periods of captivity? Are there any? And I'm not asking you as an expert. I know, blah, blah, blah. You have experience that most people don't have, and for what it's worth.
No, I would say in a vast majority of the examples provided, the answer is no. They would not be able to just eventually go off on their own. It would require a level. It would be arduous. It would require a great deal of time, and the what would be involved would just be, it would be an incredible endeavor to see if it's possible. But, long-term captivity, has a ways of just not making or taking away animals' ability. Their instincts are shot, they just don't have them. The other thing is, much of the animals that you've described require to be with other animals, so it would require other animals' abilities to both adapt as well. So you'd be gambling on reintroducing a pod to another pod. It would just be very difficult. Is it possible? Maybe, I would say. Maybe. Is it worth the undertaking? Yes. Is someone willing to fund such a thing over the long term and anything else? It'd be a tough one. But there are alternatives on the way, and a whale sanctuary is the answer, because you can cordon off a fjord or a bay of sorts in the ocean, and you can provide these animals the care that's necessary by humans and whatnot, but give them a semblance of their natural environment, future of these animals. It's care under human care in the best of our ability to provide for them a natural environment.
All right. Have you ever been to Lac Saint Jean in Quebec?
No.
There's an amazing zoo called I think it's called the Saint Félicien Zoo, where it was outdoors, and it was in an area that's cool enough at most times, and it just felt like one of those experiences where it felt like the animals were happy, but I don't think I was as socially conscious of the issues now. When we last visited, it was like 5 years ago, but like, I mean, do you have a list of places that could take Smooshi and treat her properly or deal with her well?
I have one ideal location in mind, which is really across the board absolutely ideal, and it's possible. Beyond that, I don't love all of the facilities, to be honest, but to be fair, anywhere other than Marineland would be better for Smooshi. Granted, if I'm capable of being in her life in some capacity. So I'm negotiable to a certain extent. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. What I mean is, there is one ideal location. I would love to see her go to. There's a zoo in Seattle. I just think it would just be perfect for her.
Okay, now before I actually forget, first of all, where can people who want to support you, who don't know where to go to support you in this ongoing battle?
So my suggestion is follow me on social media. I've put the handle Walrus Whisperer. That's my Twitter handle. From there, you can find my Instagram. It's basically Walrus Whisperer, but it's 2 words with an underscore. You can visit savesmooshi.com. There's a short documentary that actually will take you to my GoFundMe page. And if you're on my Instagram, you can there are there's pictures that you can click on. You'll find the link to buy the classic Life is Short, Steal a Wall, the instant classic Life is Short, Steal a Walrus, and Save Smooshi shirts, which is a big hit. And these I just give away. So if you follow me on Instagram, that may happen for you.
Yeah, that's. I'm not sure that's a bumper sticker I would put on my car, if only because there's a lot of neighborhood kids around. But and I should say
something. We can spell it THOQUE if you'd like.
Yeah, you know what? That would be sorry, much more marketable. Now, and just for my own subscribers, I've been seeing all of the comments in this StreamYard live streaming app. I don't know if there's been any what we call super chat, because if there has been, I haven't been seeing it here, so I don't want anyone to think I'm being rude and ignoring them. But if there is super chat, and if there has been, I don't see it in this stream. But I do see all the comments. So now I'm going to just go back to my notes and see if I have any remaining comments. Everyone who has a question that they want to get out there, stick it in the comment section, and we'll start asking them and see if and what Phil can answer. Okay, well, here's one question already. Viva Frei, how did Phil get involved with legislation to change the industry? Did Phil initiate it? I know the answer to this, but go ahead and explain this, because it's interesting.
I would say, yes, I was involved. And I would say that it would be very early.
And by the way,
perhaps from inception.
Explain the process, because you went into it with Joe Rogan. I don't think I'm not sure if we overlap too much, but briefly explain that whole process and how it culminated with the results you got.
Well, there's nothing brief about the process, but I was part of what's called the tabling of a private member's bill in the Senate, which was S203. Basically, it was only slightly amended through the process. But so what happens is in a Senate private member's bill, it's introduced and it goes through all of the similar steps that the bill would do if it was introduced in a more traditional way in the House of Commons. So it goes through all that motions. But whereas a bill that's introduced in the House of Commons will go to the Senate for debate and sober second thought before coming back and becoming receiving royal ascension and becoming law. S203 had to do it twice. So our bill was introduced in the Senate, so it did the whole rounds, and then eventually graduated to the to the House of Commons, where it did it again, only throughout that process, because it had taken so long and it had received so much, there were a lot of roadblocks by some players, and inspired by the industry, coerced, helped by the industry. It was quite expedited in the House of Commons. That was the good news.
Okay, amazing. Now, actually, it reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you. I know your relationship with the late John Holer. What on a personal level? I mean, do you with the lawyer now who is handling the file, who probably I'm anticipating or assuming is the what's the word? The acting, not the mastermind in a bad way, but he's the person handling this file now and carrying it forward. Do you get along with this person? Do you ever see him? Is there animosity personally between the two of you that might hinder meaningful discussions?
You're asking me whether Marineland's lawyer and I have a not negative relationship?
Do you have a negative relationship with one another, or is there absolutely just no talking? That's how negative it is.
Marineland's lawyer purports that we have this horrible disdain for each other and everything else. I'd say we have a long history. I've been watching his song and dance for some time. He's trying, through him, Marineland is trying to ruin my life. I've become familiar with his playbook. I would say there's aspects of it that I don't like, and there are aspects that I don't hate because, let's just say that I've sort of sabotaged and reversed and weaponized all of their efforts, his in particular, to sort of take me down. And when your enemy's making mistakes, you let them. So I can make the argument that I both dislike Marineland's lawyer and very much like him.
And now, is the feeling, when John Holer was alive, obviously the feeling was people hate lawyers when they're representing a client. And they tend to personalize the litigation with the lawyer, even though the lawyer is, the agent or the representative. And so I've seen videos. I know what your relationship must have been like with John Holer. But at this point, do you feel that the lawyer is a representative, or is the party now that is carrying forward this lawsuit?
You said something poignant in your prior videos. You said lawyers don't particularly like to be ridiculed by the people that they're suing. I have intentions. I'm making sure that everybody that's been involved in this, in whatever capacity, atones for, or rather is responsible for their actions. I believe that the lawsuit against me and the within action of the past 6.5 years has been irresponsible, and someone should be responsible for that. I guess in a abuse of process counterclaim, that's an opportunity to sort of lay all of that out, and that's what I want. So whoever is responsible to have to bear whatever becomes of all the absurdity of what this past 7 years has been, well, then so be it. They all have to eat it.
Okay, fair enough. Now, Joey's cleaning lady says, is defendant going to retain Viva Frei as an attorney with regards to this matter? The answer I can answer that is a big no, because I'm not even certified to practice in Ontario. I'm a Quebec lawyer. But this is why, knowing what the process is like, I couldn't stomach this. I was telling a few people before, I had a file start in 2015. We scheduled for trial in 2018, and it's coming to trial in 2020. And that process is, to do it on a one file basis is one thing. To make it your life is another. People who have not been sucked into this spiral or black hole of litigation will never really understand how distressing it is for the clients and stressful for the lawyer. So I'm not taking any more.
I don't envy being my lawyer. I'll tell you that right now. I really don't. I don't envy following me with a camera. I don't envy the people responsible in trying to tell the stories surrounding Marineland. I don't envy any of those people. I enjoy having the best seat in the house, but it's suited for me. No one else. No one wants to do what I'm doing just as well. So,
Redneck Day says, "Do you have any idea when your lawsuit will be over? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel yet?"
There is a light at the end of the tunnel. By way of relief from some of the shenanigans that have happened, our examinations that are scheduled in middle and late September are peremptory, which should mean that we'd be looking at an early 2020 trial, for which there's a great deal of interest and support. So we are going. I'm insisting on it. We're going to trial. The light at the end of the tunnel is, the light at the end of the tunnel is, if Marineland doesn't want to go to trial, it's possible. But the greatest light is that we're able to make things uncomfortable with them. What a beautiful gift they provided me with. It's amazing. This lawsuit, what a dream.
For those of you who don't know what peremptory means, in theory, it means if they skip the date, I don't know what the sanction is, but it means that it is the it's the final date. If you miss it, I don't know if there's going to be a dismissal of suit or an administrative dismissal, or we're
able to file a motion to dismiss.
Okay, so peremptory means this is the last time you ever get to extend the delay, unless force majeure, et cetera, et cetera.
Force majeure.
Yeah, well, I don't know. So I feel, look, I won't even say what could happen. How does Phil get his beard? This is a Shah Boinky Boink. How does Phil get his beard to look so lustrous? It is good, Phil. Nice and full.
That's amazing, because up until recently, like prior to ever growing an actual beard, I used to have these funky little chin straps, everything else, because I couldn't actually get it full. And so, I don't know, I guess patience is a virtue. It's the one aspect of my physical morph into old age that I don't hate.
So this is not turning into an ad for Dollar Shave Club or anything.
Although I'm happy to take sponsorships.
We can talk. We'll talk about that after the camera. There's ways to find, alternative ways to finance the cost of litigation. Let's see if there's
that is a conversation I'd be interested in.
I'm not the best person to do it, because I have never been the best at monetizing on YouTube, but there are ways to monetize a following. And not that you want to do this to pay legal fees. Typically, you want to do it to actually live and enjoy life, not to pay a lawyer to defend you in a lawsuit. But that's what happens.
Well, listen, I'm gonna however I'm chewed out once they spit me out. Or however chewed up I am when they spit me out, I'm gonna be looking to do something else. I mean, I don't hate speaking with people and having interesting conversations and whatnot. So there's some interest from me to maybe myself get involved in some podcast or some capacity, because I like this shit, man.
Well, there's definitely a story to tell on multi. I mean, I know Joe Rogan floated the idea with the volume of what you have and where you can go with this. So there's definitely places to go. And actually, I'm reading a question ahead. We'll get there. What if Marineland? This is Sparhopper, and I think I know the answer to this question. What if Marineland did step up and prove proper care, healthy weight food, etc.? Would you accept?
Marineland is irredeemable.
It's fair enough. I mean, yeah.
This ends one way. This ends one of two ways.
Do I don't know if I want to ask.
I won't say.
Okay. Mega Mindy Lou says, is he working in a regular job now, or is he unemployable? Okay. It's a highly judgmental question, but let's what are you doing right now to actually make ends meet?
Well, I'm certainly employable.
I know. I think beyond that, I mean, you're more than employable. But I had the same question. I actually forgot to ask it. What are you doing now?
It's been an interesting road. I mean, I've had taken up a series of odd and strange jobs, but ultimately I've settled into a role as a letter carrier for Canada Post, and I've got a Airbnb where people come live in my basement and essentially, help me out.
And now we got one question. Toy Insanity, who has been very active here, says, who will play Phil in a movie? And I'm looking at you, and I know you do look like a celebrity, and I'm trying to figure out who is going to pick the most appropriate visual celebrity that would play you when they make a movie about this. Now, we'll wait for some answers in there. Phil, I think we covered it. I mean, I'm not sure that I have any more questions, and I think... it's amazing. I have obviously a much smaller following, and my goal was not to, my ideal goal. I think it's totally a pipe dream. Is I'm going to be in Niagara Falls for an event in September. I'm not here to promote only one side. I would love to sit down with the lawyer or the representative and flesh out what their position, what their end goal is, and because what ends up happening, and I can say this from experience in litigation, is sometimes it's sort of like sunk cost theory where a party wants to get out, but they can't find the way out. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors in settlement discussions. I know that sometimes people initiate a litigation, not even understanding from their own perspective what's going to happen. It goes places they don't like, and they feel too invested to get out or to even see the way out. And I would like to hear what their perspective is. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe it will. We'll see.
It's not. Well, I'll tell you where it's going to happen. It's going to happen in court. That's where it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It won't be by you. It won't be by any requested interview. It won't be by any documentarians. It won't be by anybody except for by virtue of them forcing themselves to have to go. That's it. They will be revealed, and they'll do it on their own, but it won't be by request of anybody.
Well,
again,
and all sensitized.
Until it breaks off.
I know your lawyer probably has said the same thing to you. No one ever knows how it goes in front of a judge. No one ever knows what one little fact or detail a judge gets hung up on, and stuff just goes downhill from there.
And here's what I'll say in response to that. If that's in fact the case, and that a completely fictitious lawsuit with a long history of inaction and within action and just abuse from head to toe serves to actually offer the relief of some remedy by the courts in some way, then so be it. That's on the courts. I want to reveal it. Do your fucking worst to me. I'm challenging the courts. Punish me. Punish me for what I've done.
Now
I've done horribly wrong. I'm such a criminal. Show me what I merit for being such a renegade to this corporation, to this zoo. Okay.
And the other thing is,
do your worst. I hope the court does.
Another thing I've always said is even when you win, you lose. Sometimes you can win and then you get stuck in an appeal and then it's another year, 2 years, the associated litigation costs.
There's, full disclosure, whereas I had some money before this started and savings and whatnot, their objective to basically annihilate my fiscal sovereignty has been met. And I feel I'd become more dangerous on account of it because, I have nothing to lose now. So do your worst. I'm seeing this through. I have a lot of support. Let's see what the process does. Let's see how I'm chewed out, how chewed up I am when they spit me out. That's on the courts. Okay. If the courts want that on themselves, that's up to them to do.
No, it's like I make my predictions after having read things, but it's like the litigation. There's a litigation process, and then there's the trial process. And the trial process, one can never be sufficiently prepared for trial, and not sufficiently. One can never predict what's going to happen at trial. Like things always happen, and
well, if we look at the arc of how things have gone, I would challenge that we will never go to trial. I still stand by that. I've said that since day one. Number two, it doesn't take a lot of having a look in the inside of this file to see how well trial will serve Marineland. It just becomes a question of how well it defends me or it serves me. I already know how this ends for Marineland. It doesn't end pretty for them. It's just a question of how it ends for me.
Well, that's the other thing is there's the trial side, then there's the social side, then there's the legal side, then there's the whole business side of this where they can win something on a judgment and still face the exact same, even a good judgment could be bad press. I think I forgot to ask you.
Let me ask you this. We go to trial. How is by virtue alone of Marineland serving me or suing me, how has that served them so far? 7 years of this.
The other thing is, I say this, I've said this also before, even in a judgment that may be favorable to Marineland on one element, the judgment itself can contain things that Marineland might not want to make public, might not want to make legal fact in a judgment of the court. It could be favorable to them. They could still say things that are not nice. So then what do I do after trial when it's all said and done? What becomes of me? What do I wind up doing? How does that end? Because there's an assumption that the end of trial somehow means the end of my being a hemorrhoid for Marineland. But where am I going? I'm having the time of my life. Let the trial end. Maybe they'll sue me again. Well, on that note, not that every fear hides a wish. First of all, it's an interesting thing. I think I've noticed a pattern. My assessment is the bed has been made now, and Marineland is probably just trying to deal with it. I don't know what the financial arrangements are with their attorney, if he's an employee, if he's doing this not pro bono, but you always wonder what the financial arrangements are with the opposing counsel and their clients. And you tend to know that when one party is not paying their lawyer because they have another agreement or whatever, it's sort of like playing poker with other people's money, and it sort of falsifies the process because everybody's not playing with, you know, the same financial rules and limitations. So not knowing what that relationship is, the practical side of me says nobody wants to go to trial on the, not nobody. The practical side of me says that Marineland doesn't want to go to trial on this because then everything becomes public on a much bigger scale. And even if they win,
it's been expressed.
Yeah,
it should be noted. It's been expressed. They've expressed this is not going to trial. You're not going to make some show of this. We're not putting all the eyes of the world on this thing. This is not going to be some spectacle. And I say, yes, it is.
I don't know, I'm sure if you sat in front of a judge would tell you the same thing. But the judges tend to try to twist the arms as much as the lawyers. You know what? I think this is good. We're
two ways this ends. Two ways.
Well, I mean, so I don't want to ask you the dark questions. I have to ask you the dark questions, and you'll tell me what you think. You haven't seen Smooshi in 5 years. I mean, I'm sure you. How do you know she's going to recognize you?
It's still consistent in her behavior every single day. When they bring her out, she's just looking for me. Nothing's changed. It's an unbreakable bond. Again, it's an anomaly. It's not just me speaking on account of some person who's trying to be possessive over some animal. Science has spoken here. She will never forget me. The second she either smells me, hears me, or sees me, she's running over, probably frantically.
And now, and I don't want to ask the really dark questions. And on Joe Rogan, you said something which stuck with me, and I mentioned this to you when we talked a little while back, that it's sort of like a hostage situation, like someone has your dog in their basement. You'll never forget about it and walk away from it. I mean, if I don't want to say like, what's the lifespan of a walrus? How many years does she have left?
At Marineland, she could die any day. History would indicate that all of their walruses are now dead, and they all died. I mean, some of which were showing symptoms of malnourishment and whatnot. There were signs, but others were pictures of health only moments before they died. So she's at risk every moment. But in a perfect situation, she could last another almost 20 years. 30, 35 years. It exists. It can happen.
Okay.
She's 15. 15 or 17. I can't remember exactly now. Numbers change because time is flying.
Yeah.
And the lawsuit isn't. So I feel like in a lot of ways I'm still stuck in 2012.
No, it's crazy. It is. I think my two brothers are attorneys in Ontario. One's a practicing litigator. I'm going to double check, but I have a feeling that this is excessively long by Ontario standards. By Quebec standards, it would just be.
I think there's a term for it. It's 3 words, and it starts with abuse. The middle one you can argue is not a word. We can make it all in one word: abusive process. Abusive process. You say it 1,000,000 times. We know what this is.
Phil, I'm going to leave it. On this, is there anything you want? I mean, anything you want to say that you haven't said?
No.
Okay, good. This has been. I mean,
the way I thought about that.
Well, no, I know.
How I thought about that for some time.
I'm not trying to invite you.
Clear, concise answer.
I'm not trying to invite you.
Am I ready for my examination, September 13th?
Look, I hope whoever's watching this now is more familiar with it. From a litigation process, it's something for people to know. From an activist process, from a legislative process, there's a lot to learn in this. It's an amazing story. I'm genuinely glad. I don't know who it was that said I had to get on it. It's been a learning process for me, but I hope people found this insightful from the legal side of it. From the activist side, they'll follow you, and hopefully you continue growing this. And now the new law is in, so it's just a question of a new era of knowledge. Oh, here, speaking of which, 1, 2, 3, there he is. It's the new. This is my the beautiful dog. We got the other one who's paralyzed in the back leg, so she doesn't get up quite as easily. But no, it's a new. You want to say goodbye?
Beautiful dog.
When he behaves, he's beautiful. When he doesn't behave, he's my goodness. So that's it. I hope everyone liked this. I hope everyone knows more than they did 2 hours ago. And if anyone wants to tweet you, get in touch with you, you're on social media. Walrus Whisperer on Twitter, Instagram.
Walrus Whisperer, 2 words with an underscore. Facebook, I guess, if people still use that. I kind of don't, so don't find me there. But whatever. If you do, you can give me a like. I'm everywhere. And if you're in Niagara Falls, make sure you hit me up.
I will 100% for sure. No doubts. In September, I'll message you and we'll meet up. And I'm going to be following this. So there will be periodic follow-up vlogs on whatever is public, because I'm not interested in discussing anything that's not public in the litigation process.
Well, you showed up at the right time because there's lots coming.
Awesome. All right, Phil, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone, see you soon. I'm going to end the broadcast right now. And it's going to end